Welcome to this session on coding the web self-service, working with the COM API. This is the first of two lessons looking at the topic, and here you'll see that we'll be finishing this off before touching on the .NET API. So we're in the 15th lesson, and that means that we really are approaching the end of our time, our 18 lessons together. In this lesson, we're going to set the scene, really. We're going to do a lot of explaining around the architecture of self-service, explaining how that works and how the API differs from the main COM API used within both the interface of Sage CRM and ASP pages. So we'll look at the philosophy of self-service as well, the resources that are available for you to learn more about the product, and then going in and looking at how the demo site that is shipped with the product works. And so you have an understanding of both what that's about in terms of a proof of concept, and then how we can go ahead and deal with some of the questions around coding and other limitations. So let's start with that and look at, first of all, the help. Self-service is interesting as a topic because it's spread over 3 different manuals. So if you want to learn everything that there is around self-service, you actually have to look both within the user guide, the system administrator guide, and the developer guide. And it's in the developer guide within the section API reference that you'll find the description of really the self-service core and how you would start to code. Most of the instructions, though, on how to construct a self-service site won't be necessarily found within the main documentation. Because we ship a demo site, the demo site itself is its teaching aid, but you'll also see descriptions around the self-service API within the Hints, Tips and Tricks blog. So we've got lots of articles on the usage and creation of self-service extensions. We've got development examples that you can use directly, and there are discussion forums about how self-service can be used within inside Sage CRM. And so we'll look at the other resources that are available to us within the Sage support and training YouTube channel. There's an extensive set of short videos that explain everything from how to configure self-service to how to actually go about building your first site. This lesson is an introduction to this architecture of self-service. It's going to be discussing how it fits into the main user interface, and it'll be making you think about, in terms of the development aspects, about things like security. There are some examples that you can look to when you're working with self-service in consideration of, is self-service the right API for you? And so there are going to be some questions that we'll throw up in terms of whether you should be using perhaps the REST API for interactions. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But let's work with, first of all, the question, what is self-service? I tend to think about self-service as a way of turning CRM inside out. We're used to the idea of that a user logs on into Sage CRM and does work that describes the interactions that they've had with the customer. Those customers, contacts and companies are then points of interest within Sage CRM. But self-service takes that and says, no, the focus of any CRM system is, of course, the customer. And instead of just saying the customer is at the center of all these transactions, we actually make the actual customer themselves able to interact directly with the information inside the CRM system. It's a way of disintermediating so that the customer themselves are actually interacting directly with their data, or, as I should say, with the data set that is appropriate for a customer to directly interact with. So when we'll see is that we are in complete liberty to be able to design our self-service interactions to exactly explain what a customer can do directly to the CRM data. But its chief ability is to integrate with a corporate website to allow data to flow seamlessly from that corporate website through into the CRM system directly as a result of a customer choosing particular actions, entering data, and potentially being able to maintain the full life cycle of the creation, read, update, and delete of data. It is very powerful in what it can do, and you can use self-service not only on the custom entities, but also, not only on the system entities, but also custom entities that you've created. And it's up to you how much, how little, or what type of interactions are available inside the self-service implementation. When I come on to look at the demo website, it is exactly that. It is described in a particular way and only will do certain functions, and other functions are not possible within the demo. But the full API, you have got full control over the CRM data. Now, it is just one of the choices that we can make when we're working with anything that integrates the CRM product with a corporate website. We've touched on this earlier on in the course, where we could actually be designing a way of interacting using the SOAP API or the REST API, and that was the question that I posed just a moment ago. What was appropriate? We can also have a website generating emails and sending those directly into CRM to be managed by perhaps the advanced mail manager, or if we only want very limited functionality, using the web to lead inquiry form to be able to capture information and sign-ups from customers. The useful thing is that we know, though, that flow of information can go all the way through to the accounting system that underlies Sage CRM or any other back office system to which Sage CRM is integrated. You could theoretically, and as we saw in earlier lessons, how Sage CRM can connect and attach to another database, how we can attach to another database, describe the tables in those databases, and serve those up inside CRM as screens. Because if Sage CRM has the ability to interact with the table, then self-service also has the ability to interact with those third-party tables as well. So it means that accounting information can be served up, any accounting information can be served up potentially through the self-service API. And again, I'm emphasizing that this is an API choice. It's not something that is out of the box. There isn't a portal that is a turnkey solution. Everything has to be made by you. So let's see and think through what can happen in terms of somebody who visits a corporate website. So imagine a customer visits Panoply Technologies, this fictitious company, fills in details that they've logged on, they have an account set up, so they're able to be able to see information that the self-service application is designed to show them. Perhaps there's a minimum set of core information that the customer is able to change about themselves in their account. Perhaps the customer can also see past orders or customer care issues that they've raised. And they may also want to be able to create new issues or new inquiries, and in which case they are served directly into CRM with work potentially being allocated to a user. And you can design the integration with self-service in such a way as quick notifications and escalations will be fired as people carry out interactions with self-service. So it is just a way of getting information into the main CRM database, and once it's in the CRM database, it's identifiable as coming from self-service, and you can have particular actions associated with that. We ship a demo version, and you can see the demo version underneath wherever you've installed your CRM with the correct license. It will be typically called CRM self-service demo, and you will then be able to play with it to do the work that you want to. There's a README file associated with that, which will explain the users that you're able to, I should say, how you go about setting up someone to use, or a visitor to use, the corporate website that we've created. This is a stand-in for a corporate website. It's built using fairly responsive design, so you could see that on a mobile interface, whatever, and see that it works. But it is the important element to realize is that we've got is the code that we have built here to show you what's possible with the self-service API. Now, if we have a look at some of the features of self-service, when we come on, and it's likely now to be in next week's lesson, when we look at the actual code and how we go through and do some of the tasks, you'll see that a lot of what we're writing and what we work with are very familiar, and especially around the data manipulation side. The find record function is something that we would have met earlier on within the course, when we were looking at things like table level scripts and create scripts, and then again on the ASP pages. It's enormously flexible because you can mix with whatever technologies you like to be able to deliver the interface that you need, and then integration with whatever else inside the system. Probably the biggest headache that you will face with self-service is thinking about the security needs and the control of access. This is because it's possible to design the system around the concept of anonymous access, and you have to think about the mechanism by which access is granted to ensure it's not possible to bypass this or inadvertently access information once a visitor is authorized into a particular page. We can start to see this concept here in this slide. Self-service has this idea of a visitor attending a corporate website. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see the concept of a user, somebody who logs on into Sage CRM, consumes a license as they log on, and they will pass through the security levels and be assigned a session ID or a token that indicates that this person has been authenticated. And it's from that very logon and their credentials at that moment, their rights are their rights are then granted. So a user belongs to a team, a user belongs to a security profile, a user belongs to a territory, and all those things immediately control inside the user interface what a user can see. And their point is that this is something that we have counted in terms of the license. A visitor attends a CRM website or a corporate website, and whereas you may have a set of system licenses of say 30 named users or 10 concurrent users, here you may be dealing with visitors in the hundreds or thousands a day, and those hundreds and thousands a day, as you start to interact with the corporate website, they are just potential customers. There are two types of visitor to a corporate website. Ones which are anonymous, which means that you haven't taken them through any criteria check, you've not authenticated them in any way, and there are those which you have authenticated and you have issued a challenge to in order to guard certain pages. Now that question of authenticated versus anonymous visitors is very important to understand, because it is perfectly possible to design self-service so that there is never a need for a visitor to a site to log on. That visitor could have free access to read all sorts of information which is not personal and not related just to them. So, for example, you may want to put the knowledge-based features of Sage CRM, the idea of the solutions tables and the solutions progress information, some of that, and some maybe related information that is associated with the solutions like notes. You may want to make those available through anonymous access, so anyone can search and carry out a check to see about solving their own problems before they log a case. So it's there are some strong use cases for the concept of anonymous access. You also want anonymous access where you are lead collecting. So if somebody wants to be able to attend a corporate website, to be able to access a page that would directly write their information into CRM without being logged on, then you have to enable that if you are doing lead capture. And when somebody's signing up to a newsletter, perhaps, that is all anonymous, being able to allow for the page to be written using CRM objects, both for the user interface and also the database tables. Most of what we will look at, though, will consider the idea of authenticated access, and we will see that in some detail in the next lesson as we start to build our pages and we give thought as to what are the considerations we must make in order to keep a self-service site secure. So, to recap that information, user is someone who logs on to CRM using the familiar main CRM interface. They consume a paid license. We see that information within the user table. That user is linked then into all of the other information around security, like teams, like the security profile, like territories. A visitor is someone who accesses through the corporate website and they have direct, through the API and the way in which the API is used within the pages, they have direct ability to interact with the CRM database. There may be commercial licensing arrangements which determine exactly how you do that, but generally speaking, they are represented by a sign-on associated with the person or the company, but mainly it's the person. And there is no need necessarily for a visitor to the corporate website to actually authenticate. They could interact directly, although it would be, you have to be very circumspect as to what types of insert and update and delete actions that you want to allow. So again, how this fits into our world of where you are designing a self-service experience for the customer. You could, for example, and I'm just using here Sage 300 as an example, but this equally could be Sage 200, Sage 100, or whatever, where a customer is able to access a corporate website and through the API have all sorts of information delivered to them in the context of their account on that website. That account on the website allows them to control different preferences that they may want to have in terms of the types of information that they see. Again, this is permitted by the developer. And then all that flows through into where we have our opportunity quote order information from within inside CRM, which corresponds to the underlying account information, the contact and the orders that are placed. Let's start to understand self-service from the perspective of our user here. So if I have a look at the idea of anonymous access through the creation of a lead, this is the lead features within inside CRM. This is not the web to lead feature. And we're going to then go on into the question of how that relates to behavior inside the company and opportunity. And then finally, we'll look at how we deal with all of the information that can be set automatically by the self-service API. We'll then look at that with inside CRM. So the demo site is where we're starting off. And so this is self-service, CRM self-service demo on my machine. This is what it looks like. You arrive on the screen. If you have installed the demo system with the self-service database and self-service site installed, you start off on the home page. You'll notice that you've got here the log on, the support page, the newsletter, the contact us. This particular demo site is focused on customer service, but there is actually an interaction with the lead to opportunity workflow in the demo, and we'll look at that now. Because here you can see I've not logged on. I'm just using this in an anonymous way. This screen that you see served up here exists in metadata, or rather I should say the vehicle that you're looking at here that says first name, last name, email, company name. These captions are, and those fields and that field behavior, for example, it could be a select field. These are all being served directly from metadata in a very similar way to the way in which we saw ASP pages being built. So we are using the get block mechanism, getting a screen block, and we are writing it out at this point in edit mode to allow for the information to be captured. So I can fill this in. These fields can have associated with them on this screen create scripts, on-chain scripts and validate scripts as well. So you can include validation behavior on these. I haven't got any of that in here, but you see I've completed the information, and I can then choose to save my record, and you can see that the acknowledgement has taken place. This is all within the demo system. These screens are all making use of metadata to render the fields out onto the HTML. And if we look into CRM, and here, this is where I've logged on into the main CRM interface as a user, as opposed to a visitor, I can see that this new lead from Gareth McDade has come into the system. Now, if that's come into the system and I drill down into this record, I can think that what I need to do now is match this to an existing company. I need to convert this to an opportunity and gradually move so that this is inside and being worked on as an opportunity. Now, I've skipped a few steps here. You can see that I have gone through the process. I have attached to the company Eurolandia. The next thing that I can do is to go and see whether I can edit this. So I've got my opportunity and company all here. I can do the work that I might want to do. I've filled in more information saying that this has come from the website. Any of these fields, by the way, could have been on that form to complete and could have been automatically set as it was written into CRM. So all this information can be added in, and we can workflow now an opportunity that it's been converted through from a lead into an opportunity. If we've got this as an opportunity, this would then show up inside the self-service site. This would show up equally if we had a self-service site that allowed for the creation of a case in the same way. So any information that shows up that is attached, or rather I should say, any information that a visitor enters into the system can be linked to that visitor, especially if they are, well, if they are authenticated, we will know who that visitor is. They will have a corresponding person record in CRM, and we can therefore create the necessary structures inside CRM. Here I'm looking at the person, Gareth McDade. So this is where we had a lead come in, and it was associated with an existing company in person. And now looking at that actual person for which the opportunity was created. But I want to have a look at how this Gareth McDade can start to check and manage their own data. And to do that, we look underneath the self-service tab. You can see that it's typically hidden away within the More section of the screens. If I go in there, this is where I can then mark this particular user, what their ID is, what their password is, and I can then enable them there and then. So if I enable this user and I've saved all of that record, I'm going to come now and log on, this time as Gareth McDade. You can see that I've come onto the log on screen. It's at this screen that there's a whole set of behavior that will allow us to double check to see that this is an accredited user. If I choose to save, or rather I choose to pass in my credentials, I'm logged on. But it would have errored and caught the error if I had tried to put in incorrect information. Here you can see the number of cases I'm working on, how many cases have been closed for this particular customer. These are all the inquiries that have come from the customer, and the customer can start to drill down and see what that support information is like. As I said, the self-service demo that is shipped with the product is very much skewed to the demonstration of customer service rather than opportunity management or sales management. But we have a very nice screen here, and you can come into the place here, and we can start to enter in a new case. I've chosen a minimal, or rather the demo screens are a minimal set of information here. If this was a real entry screen, you'd have more screens, more fields available to capture more information. This is, again, simply a proof of concept, showing you how a screen is rendered up from metadata. You see the fields. Those are the fields that are chosen to be displayed, and you notice how that reference ID field is working. That reference ID is auto-generating the pattern for the alternative key or the reference key within Sage CRM. If you are familiar with opportunities and cases in their structure, both of them have an oppo_reference ID field and case_reference ID field, which are populated as a result of a stored procedure. So their type is of the stored procedure. The pattern is user ID hyphen incrementing number. And in the case of self-service, because there is no user, the default would be 0. So it is 0 hyphen and then the number, because of the use of the stored procedure. Anyway, let's enter some information. Those little symbols that you see on there are because I've got browser extensions that check my grammar and other things as I'm entering into forms. But as I then choose to move on, you can see that there I have saved a new case into Sage CRM. If I look ahead, if I look now back into CRM, I've come into the cases associated with Gareth McDade. Now remember, when I was on this screen, I am the visitor, Gareth McDade. It is me who's accessing the site. And when I looked at information inside the browser and said, oh, look, I've got this number of cases, that's my perspective as Gareth McDade. When I'm looking at a screen like this, I am the user of CRM. So this is where now customer and CRM user are looking at the same data, but they're looking at it from different perspectives. Here is where the work is being done. We can see that in our case, we have new cases listed out. I can drill down and I can see that this has indeed come from that web form that Gareth McDade, the customer, filled in. If we go back at this level, if we were looking at any of these cases, self-service could be expanded to include messages onto the screen. This is where the private message boxes, in-account mail can be delivered to customers if you are doing that. it's exactly the sort of thing that a lot of when you are working with a customer, they make inquiries internally within Sage. We have systems which have these internal messages when we're logging a case or where we're logging a system. It's exactly the same thing going on inside CRM. We can create communications backwards and forth. If I take that a little bit further, here you can actually see that I can create and send a message into CRM. Now, in this particular case, this is not sending an email, it's not sending an SMS, this is directly associating it as a task into CRM. So if I choose now to save that and look back into CRM to see what Gareth McDade has done, you can see that message of this is a test message in the list of communications here which are pending for Gareth McDade. And because of the way in which we can set field values, we could have triggered here the notifications, which itself would have resulted in an on-screen alert in the little red symbol at the top of the screen, or it could have resulted in an email being generated from the system. This, though, is very simply a communication requiring us to do work, but any of these fields could have been set inside the system to have created and automatically even scheduled appointments through this mechanism as well. In a moment, we need to start sort of focusing in on what we'll have to do when it comes to creating our ASP pages to support the behavior. Here's the idea of the US self-service object. We're going to find that we aren't using the CRM object as before. We are using a different instantiation of the DLL, it's registered and becomes a different object, and it is a child of the eWare object, but there are certain limitations to the objects and methods that are available to us because we exist in a different way. It's important to roll back and look at this idea of what's going on when somebody logs on. When we log on into CRM, and this is the right-hand experience that we see when we're logging on as the system administrator, when we log on as the sales manager in the demo system, Susan May, when we log on as the marketing manager, Dave Montana, when we log on as these people, we're consuming a license and we are inheriting all of the settings associated with the security for that user account. But there isn't that in the context of the visitor. Even if they are authenticated, they are not a user. And with the users come things like, as I said, the session information. And with the session information, you get information about what people should see on the interface and what records they should access. You don't get any of that in the context of self-service because your focus is going to be on the authenticated visitor, and the design of your authenticated experience should be just focused on you are this person accessing your account. You should only see your information, and even then only a subset of your information that we've decided that you should see. And that means that Well, that's both a design question, but also a really very fundamental thing when it comes to the behavior of what we have. So we're going to see that there will be a whole set of things we cannot do in self-service. We won't be able to have knowledge of how buttons work in the same way in terms of security control of buttons. Tabs we won't be able to use in the same way because we don't have the screen architecture. We don't have either the sense of all of the contextual information that we started to rely on and learn about when we were doing create scripts and other forms of screen-based rules. So there's some things which are just not available. We'll really look at that in the next lesson, but raising this question is that we have to think about what is and isn't available. Adding into the nature of the logon and the fact that you don't have a session, you have a visitor that is authenticated or a visitor that is anonymous, we nevertheless have to think about how we have two forms of the registration of the COM API to allow two sets of different types of customization pages to exist. And what we imagine is that self-service can be placed and worked in a way that sets the architecture so that CRM is placed into a different zone. Now, let's see what I mean by that. I'm going to go back to my diagram that I've been using to explain the idea of visitors and users. So it's this diagram. This is the architecture diagram for self-service. You see that firewall straight down the middle? What you see here are essentially two forms of installation of CRM. You have the main internal CRM server, which is where all the users will access and they talk through to the CRM database. The CRM database is where all the metadata comes from. It's where the person screens are defined, but more importantly, it's where the application data is stored as well. So that's where person, company, opportunity, case, order, quote, etc. They're all within the right-hand side of this screen, all within the user purview. But if you want to start to integrate self-service with a corporate website, this architecture imagines that you install self-service within a secondary server, which is within the demilitarized zone of the organization, so outside the main firewall. It requires, in this setup, self-service, so it's semi-detached. It will be a second implementation of CRM, but the database here is only going to contain the minimum visitor information. Self-service has a secondary database called the self-service database, which contains two main tables, the visitor table and the visitor information table, or visitor info table. The secondary registration of CRM allows for this second site to communicate through the APIs through to the main CRM service, but that's all done through the connection to the database. So it requires a database connection to be open within the context of the firewall as well. And you can set this to be a non-standard port. So your self-service architecture imagines, or this architecture imagines potentially self-service being installed again separately on a different server with connections. Now this is controlled by this concept of configuration. So where I go and have a look at the config screens. These are the fields then that talk about the different database settings, the different server settings, where the main CRM database is and where the self-service server is configured. Now, this type of information is expanded on inside the documentation and inside the blog articles. All of these settings are held underneath the registration of self-service inside the registry. So we can see inside the registry the settings of where we would find our self-service database and the main CRM database. This is all things that are accessed to enable self-service to operate. We therefore have to point different implementations of CRM, whether this is the CRM or the self-service CRM, we point to the appropriate servers. So we know which box we're on. So the CRM self-service database has a direct link there to this architecture of potentially 2 services. It also has a direct link into the question of patching when we're upgrading. So patching and upgrading means that you would have to approach both and upgrade both the main CRM server and the self-service instance, and making sure that you apply whatever is the necessary changes for that. There are limitations to this API, as I've started to talk about. Self-service is very much like the self-service API is very much like the COM API, which we looked at when designing ASP pages. The usage of the blocks is different because we don't have some of the essential information to describe the session, to describe any of the interface elements and the contextual information that we have. So there's none of the normal grounding about who am I, where am I type behavior. We have to rely on the authentication mechanism, and we have to make sure we're aware of how we are maintaining our position and inside the interface. We can't use certain things. There are certain API choices that are just out of the question. I'll explore more of those later on. And even when we come to rendering out the page, we're going to find ourselves using a slightly different mechanism to rendering out the page, because we can't make use of the assumption that there are any tab groups within the interface. We have to build most of the interface ourselves, and what we're dealing with is either the list or we're dealing with the block directly. We're going to, in the next lesson, do an exercise by which time we will have seen how to immediately access self-service, use this as anonymously. So the idea of being able to replicate a newsletter sign-up form, for example. We will then go on to look at the idea of authenticated access, so people can log on, check their account details to be able to confirm who they are, and then be able to look at the idea of building a list information and look at the process of creating a record and updating a record. And if we can get there with the time, also a search page, so that all of the main behaviors you'll see in the context of self-service. all of we're describing here essentially is just part of the collection of API choices that we have about how we get data in and out of Sage CRM. Some people really like self-service because of the flexibility and power that it presents. There are lots of things that I've done with it. For example, I like using self-service to do things like generate new REST endpoints or REST style endpoints for me to be able to carry out actions into CRM by simply invoking an endpoint that can then return a result in either JSON or XML. So I can extend other APIs by using self-service. But we can also equally find ourselves realizing that what we want to do is move over to using another approach, for example, because the self-service API depends on this idea of a database connection between wherever you've put the corporate website and self-service. You need to be able to have a database connection open. Well, in some situations, you may need to have that to be only HTTP, and which means self-service is ruled out. We're going to be finishing this topic next week. So we'll discuss how we look at all of those create, read, update, delete, search tasks that I've outlined. But right now, let's see if anyone has got any questions. Thank you and goodbye.